Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts.
Today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
This is what transpired. Critics have been waiting for this moment for years. To be honest, it's much larger than anyone anticipated. We are seeing the whole disintegration and collapse that everyone knew was coming. But no one could have anticipated the extent of the destruction when it all fell apart. Something crazy began to happen immediately after Anthony Joshua completely destroyed Jake Paul. On December 19, 2025, federal agencies went into high gear and started moving very quickly. The FBI is making a lot of arrests. Meanwhile, strong accusations surfaced that the Paul brothers attempted to flee the nation, and a mountain of evidence accumulated about massive fraud and staged fights that allegedly violated federal gambling laws. Take a moment to consider that. What started out as theories on the internet, those private discussions that circulated through Reddit threads and went viral on TikTok, which most people wrote off as internet trash, turned into a true FBI investigation with real criminal ramifications. And when more information continues to come to light and new information emerges, one fact sticks out above the rest, unquestionably true. This age of handpicked nobodies and false boxing entertainment has come to an end with the Jake Paul chapter. Did you ever notice that he was becoming tired and decide to ease off on the gas a little? Yes, without a doubt. Certainly a little. You know, I wanted to entertain the people, but I didn't want to cause harm to anyone who didn't deserve it. Did you carry Mike? Yes. A tiny bit, that is. Yes. Like, there was a moment when, I was like, okay, he's not really engaging back. Not sure if this is because he's exhausted or anything. And I could sense that he was getting a little older. And I simply admire him so much. And that is similar to violence. I wanted to be aggressive and take him down, knock him out, and do all that when he slapped me. But that kind of faded as the rounds continued. This story didn't begin with FBI operations and criminal charges. So let's take a moment to slow down. Let's go back to a time before arrest warrants and federal investigations and significant legal issues. Let's go return to a time when doubt was merely background talk. We're looking at online rumors. Normal fans who saw strange moments in Paul's fights and wondered if something felt off, or if the parts didn't fit together correctly 5 years ago. If you were to claim Jake Paul's boxing contests were staged outcomes designed more for spectacle than for athletics, you were called a tinfoil hat. A crazy individual would essentially laugh it off. You joined a rising wave 6 months ago. A portion of this population, boom connecting evidence and identifying patterns that are impossible to ignore. You're totally validated right now, today. And you've been proven right in the most bizarre way possible. The suspicion started out little, practically innocuous. Supporters noticed anomalies and minute details that seemed dubious. Fighters who behaved too eagerly during fights. Odd referee gestures that made no strategic sense. Late trial movements that seemed practiced rather than natural but remained deniable. Always brushable with handy explanation. Difficult breaks, aging champions past their prime. YouTube nonsense made for views and buzz. However, the game was drastically altered after the Tyson fight script leak appeared. The match between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul was entirely staged. Throughout the battle, Mike Tyson bit his boxing gloves several times. Fighters make strange motions to indicate that they are harmed during planned fights. Mike Tyson may have been telling Jake Paul to cool down by chewing his glove. If there's not enough evidence that this bout was staged, consider the fact that Mike Tyson is actually conversing with Jake Paul as they clinch. When we reach Anthony Joshua, this is no longer the case. Everything, since we're not dealing with a cherry-picked target or a fighter. A former two-time heavyweight champion with respectable achievements is up against us. One of the greatest heavyweight boxers in history, a true boxer with Olympic gold in his collection from victories over Vladimir Klitschko's shell experience. That Jake Paul could never even pretend to have. Joshua wasn't an elderly rival who was past his prime. Furthermore, he wasn't an MMA washout looking for quick cash. He was a legitimate world-class boxer competing against a YouTuber who had BNSing boxing gear and pretend play. More accurately than any analysis, the gambling odds depicted the situation. We're receiving a lot of attention worldwide. Through betting sites worldwide, hundreds of millions of dollars wagered on the outcome. And that's sexically why the allegations of rigging became a federal matter rather than only conjecture on the internet. When actual cash is wagered on a predetermined outcome by official bookies and gamblers, the entertainment enters federal criminal territory and becomes wire fraud. It turns into something the FBI truly looks at and has the authority to prosecute. Because of the disparity in weight, that fight was undoubtedly ridiculous. The Bronze Bomber is the only man I know who can handle the weight differential in that manner. This is going to be the first time we see Paul fight an active fighter. And we've seen Mike Tyson, which was all fun. So in my opinion, it's a little bit scripted because, the weight difference, and Joshua is a former champion and active fighter. The claims weren't going away as he probably thought. So Eddie Hearn, Joshua's well-known promoter, who has been in this business for years, launched his defense right away. It's cute, you know what I mean? It's fun in games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional. They were growing, proliferating, gaining credibility and momentum. He appeared in interview after interview saying the same thing over and over again, as if it were a prayer he prayed would come true. He insisted that if it was rectified, the FBI would look into it. Think about that argument for a short while. Examine it thoroughly. He did not argue that the accusation was absurd from the outset, or that it was impossible to write a professional boxing match. His defense essentially claimed that his dread of a federal inquiry was proof of his integrity. As if federal legislation, somehow its existence, demonstrated that no one would dare to violate it. Do you think I'd ever let AJ follow a script with Jake? Hearn asked again, almost frantically, cause he is a seasoned promoter who has handled elite boxing and understands exactly how this business works. Paul wasn't supposed to be completely destroyed by Joshua. Joshua was intended to take control early and create competitive rounds under the terms of the contract, which included constraints on how seriously he might harm Paul's market value and image. Then Paul made the admission that no public relations could conceal. Paul had to confront the reality he had been avoiding immediately following the fight. Battered and beaten, his face swelled beyond recognition. He had a broken jaw, not merely contact-related bruises. Not only was it severely hit, but it was also broken in several places. Totally damaged. He really required surgery right away. The surgery you don't need from a fight that went according to plan. The injury was catastrophic and might perhaps destroy one's career. And at that moment, trapped in the ring with the cameras rolling and no way to change the narrative for the better. For what may have been the first time in his fighting career, Paul had to be honest. He devastated me, Nam murmured, hardly able to speak through his broken jaw. However, I'll recover and continue to rule. He made an effort to salvage something from the catastrophe, but nothing was left. There isn't a plot point that might make this appear progressive. From a sports perspective, the Joshua fight wasn't competitive, tight, or even interesting. It was devastation, a mismatch, and a true boxer illustrating what happens when genuine talent meets false hype. Joshua sustained nearly no harm. Hardly work could work up a sweat. Sincere. Paul took it all in. Every blow, every amount of punishment that results from confronting someone who truly deserved to be there. And that distinction clarifies everything that transpired in Miami. After December, veteran professional boxers began to examine what they had witnessed. Paul's entire boxing career, not just the Joshua demolition, seen as a single, comprehensive narrative. Paulie Malignaggi, a professional boxer competes at the top level of the sport and acknowledges real boxing, said what everyone was starting to realize. The opponents of Jake Paul weren't selected at random from among the talent pool. They were meticulously and strategically chosen, especially out-of-shape MMA veterans who were far over their primes. Competitors who had not engaged in genuine combat in a long time. Those who prioritized money above success. He couldn't win. In fact, he couldn't even hang the moment he encountered someone his own age and experience level, functioning under conventional testing conditions, and lacking special contract shields. Everything ought to have ended with a loss. The reality check that brought things back to normal. When everyone acknowledged that Jake Paul wasn't a boxer or an athlete in the traditional sense. He was a performer posing as one, an influencer, with enough money to purchase phony credibility and good marketing skills. However, Paul changed to something else instead of acknowledging the reality and going back to creating content or accepting defeat and moving on. He changed, positioned himself in